Good morning and good afternoon, and welcome to today's session. We are going to be focused on the entrepreneurship experience with the companies who operate in the circular economy, clean tech, and also in innovation. My name is Catriona Power. I am the manager of the Circular Bioeconomy Cluster Southwest, based in Ireland. It's an initiative of Munster Technological University, and we do a lot of work with companies operating in the circular bioeconomy, helping them to scale, deliver training, and things like that. And so today I'm delighted to be hosting this session and moderating with these entrepreneurs that we have lined up for speaking. And so just to remind everybody, the session is being translated. And if you click on the globe in the bottom corner of the Zoom screen, it will be interpretation is available in French. And I'd also like to remind all the attendees as well, if you log into slido.com, the code for this session is #CETA Cleantech, and you'll be able to post your questions there. And in the Q&A component, we will then answer those questions, and we might host a couple of polls as well, and making sure it's a really interactive session. And we're really open to questions, so please do fire away. So the purpose of today, we're going to hear from clean technology companies operating in the circular economy, who are going to share practical advice, their success stories, their challenges between working between Canada and Europe as they scale up their operations. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to run through the bios of each of our three speakers, and then we will move into presentations. So first on our list for speakers today is Gurminder Minhas, and he's the managing director of a company called Performance BioFilaments based in British Columbia. He is responsible for developing commercial opportunities for fibrillated cellulose products in composite and chemical applications. Gurminder is the former director of technology deployment at Lignol Innovations, a Canadian company commercializing proprietary biomass to fuels and chemicals. And prior to Lignol, Gurminder was head of R&D for Canfor Pulp Products, where his responsibilities included product development, technology partnerships, technical sales, and marketing within North America and Asia. Gurminder has a BSc in chemistry from UBC, followed by an MBA from Simon Fraser. And Gurminder has a lot of experience from the forestry sector, so it'll be really interesting to hear his take on circular economy and scaling that up between Canada and Europe. Our second speaker today is Mark Salsberg, and he is the co-principal of a boutique engineering firm called WGD Consulting. They focus on system integration and cybersecurity in the public infrastructure space for transit and rail. He is also chairman and founder of Tracks Rail and Transit, a non-profit association focused on improving standards and safety for passenger rail contractors, maintainers, and operators across Canada. And our third speaker, last but not least, is Ken Friesen, and he's the president of Reclay Steward Edge Inc. He has helped to establish and lead the development and implementation of recycling and producer responsibility compliance systems in various different provinces, including Manitoba, Ontario, Saskatchewan, and the USA. He also serves as the executive director for the Canadian Beverage Container Recycling Association since its inception in 2010. It's a regulated industry-led organization whose mandate is to ensure effective and cost-efficient collection and recycling of used beverage containers generated from residential and away from home channels. Ken is also director of Reclay Pro, one of several competitive compliance agencies for tire recycling in Ontario. He has a background in municipal government, NGOs, and the private sector, and that gives him a variety of perspectives in his approach to recycling, waste management, and stewardship issues. I'm really looking forward to hearing from all of these entrepreneurs today and the different perspectives that they're going to bring. And so without further ado, I'm going to welcome Gurminder to the stage for him to share his presentation and tell us more about what he does. Thank you, Gurminder.
Thanks, Catriona. And thank you everybody for being here today. Are we bringing up these slides? There we are. Excellent. Well, I'm Gurminder Minhas, the Managing Director here at Performance BioFilaments. We are a Vancouver-based biomaterials company focused on commercializing nanofibrillated cellulose. And we can move to the next slide, please. Yeah, so the benefits of nanofibrillated cellulose have been well demonstrated in materials such as concrete and mortars, plastics, non-woven fabrics, as well as paints and fluids. Now, this is a new material, so currently we are operating at pilot plant capacity. So, for example, we regularly provide material samples of several kilograms up to several hundred kilograms for field trials for prospective customers. Late last year, we actually announced the construction of our first commercial plant. This is a commercial plant that will have a capacity of 5,000 tons per year. It'll be here in Quebec, Canada. That's in conjunction with one of our shareholders, Resolute Forest Products, and we expect this plant to be operating commercially in the first quarter of 2022. We've actually been quite active also with developing opportunities in Europe. One of our shareholders also, Mercer International, has extensive operations in Germany, and these are forest operations, basically sawmills and pulp mills. Next slide, please. So Catriona mentioned sustainability and the circular economy. Well, we think we fit quite well into that perspective. The material that we use as feedstock comes from certified and managed forests here in Canada. Those forests are harvested primarily for production of lumber, and the residual chips are then converted into softwood pulp by both of our shareholders, Mercer and Resolute. And we take this material, softwood kraft pulp, and we convert it from a microfiber into a nanofiber. Our material, it does use electricity, but the electricity we use here in Canada is very green. So we end up with what we call a nanofibrillated cellulose. And this NFC is nano in width, micro in length. It has an extremely high aspect ratio and very high purity. The material itself is lignin-free with very little hemicellulose. Very good thermal and temperature stability. So this actually allows our material to be used in a wide variety of applications. Next slide, please. So one of the things we're focusing on here, and again, is to develop opportunities where sustainable fibers such as our material and other forest-based fibers have been underutilized. So again, there's many uses, for example, in paper and packaging and tissue, for fibers that are derived from the forest, but we're focused on developing new applications. For example, in concrete and mortars, when we add NFC into these applications, we can improve the internal curing as the concrete dries. So this increases the strength and durability of the concrete, and more importantly, virtually eliminates cracking that can take place as the concrete dries. In non-woven materials, such as those used in construction, we can increase the tear and the tensile strength of these non-woven mats, allowing the producer again to provide stronger material, or actually to reduce the overall weight and deliver the same strength. In industrial fluids, we can actually significantly enhance the rheology. For example, when we add our material to paints, we actually can viscosify the paints at very low loadings, and when these paints are applied in thick coatings, we significantly reduce the sag. In polymeric materials, for example, in composites that are used in the automotive sector, we can offer similar strength to, for example, glass fiber reinforced composites, but at a reduced weight. So again, we're talking about adding a sustainable fiber into these new applications that, again, allow for improved sustainability, but also overall improved performance of the material. Next slide, please. So again, I'll just finish off by saying that, again, this is an exciting time, this new relationship between Canada and the EU, focusing on Cleantech. We have been involved in several projects in the past. In fact, we're quite active in business development activities in Europe, but some of the ones that I can mention, we actually did a great project with Fraunhofer and a German company called Bioplast. This was publicly announced, and we developed biocomposites for the automotive sector that basically contained 85% sustainable material for use in the automotive sector. We also participated last year, actually it was one of our last trips before the COVID shutdown, in the Canadian-Germany Bioeconomy Partnership Mission. And this is a mission, again, conducted by the Canadian International Innovation Program. We participated in this to develop new relationships between Canada and specifically Germany, where we could further accelerate biomaterials and participate in bioeconomy development. Another project that I'll highlight is we were actually applied to and got accepted into the Lafarge Wholesome Accelerator Program. This was in France. And we did an extensive R&D program over a 6-month period, both with Lafarge Wholesome at their R&D center, as well as one of their partners, CETA. And these are some of the relationships and projects we've had in the past, and I'm looking forward to developing more projects going forward. That's all I had today, and I look forward to the next speaker.
Thank you, Gurminder. Really helpful, and really, I'm so impressed by the work that Gurminder does. And I personally know Gurminder from my time spent in Canada and learning about his company when I was working there. And really interesting to see how, utilizing natural products like forestry and making an added value components that's sustainable and also has a performance benefit as well. So it's a win-win, right? So next up we have Mark Salsberg. Mark, can you please join us?
Hi, everyone. Sorry for the cockpit viewing with the headset. My kids are in the other room, so I apologize for the background noise. Just as a introduction, I am also CEO of Brens North America. It is a startup company that brings and imports materials from recycled automotive textile waste into Canada for various applications such as stormwater management. And I'll explain a little more in detail in terms of what it is that Brens North America does. So if we can present the slides, please. So while we're going through the slides, next slide, please. Just about Brens North America, some of the current stormwater solutions that are currently available in Canada, and then the concept of our material coming into being introduced to Canada with a partner of ours for various applications related to stormwater management. And then just as a side note in terms of the expectations and some of my experiences of bringing technologies into Canada, especially in the infrastructure space, how what some of the expectations would be for any companies interested in doing business here. So next slide, please. So Brens North America is a partnership between Brens Europe, based out of Pilsen, Czech Republic. What we do is we take recycled textile waste, typically made from automotive textiles, from the fabrics, car seats, floor mats, all the offcuts that come from the car manufacturing process. We take that and we essentially make materials that can be used for soundproofing, for construction materials, and for what I'm interested in is the stormwater management. So every year, North America manufactures about 11.2 million cars per year. I think that's changed since COVID, so it's probably around 13 right now, 13 million. Approximately 23 kilograms of textiles are used to make the car, but about 2 to 3 kilograms of these materials are put to waste. So they're either disposed of in landfills or incinerated. We're of the opinion where we can take the waste and apply it to the various materials that can be used for everyday world. So next slide, please. So what we do is we have partners in smart sustainable in various material manufacturers across Europe that takes the textile waste, manufactures it, and then designs materials and products and applications for those materials. It's Why we use it is because it's 100% recyclable. The materials themselves are from automotive standards, which can be mold resistant, non-toxic, and flame proof. The materials themselves have a high noise absorption rate. It does dampen vibration and has a tremendous amount of water retention. This can obviously apply to everyday world applications, especially in urban environments. So next slide, please. So as I mentioned, the materials themselves have have an excellent shelf life that allows us to make these materials into long-lasting, durable materials. The materials themselves otherwise would be in a landfill, now can be reapplied and reintroduced into everyday applications that are used across cities and urban landscapes. Next slide. So some of the applications that were done in Europe was to make a green track. Our first major installation was in Ostrava, where we took the recycled material to put in between the tracks, where we were able to reduce the noise footprint tremendously, as well as increase the water retention rate, which prevented certain flooding around areas. Also, because of the water retention ability, we were able to actually grow vegetation on top of it. The picture here is in Slovakia, so it's in our second installation. But we were able to produce and grow vegetation on the green track in Ostrava, and it's in its 5th year of operation. And the CETA is thriving and doing extremely well. Next slide. So the current situation in Canada are various different stormwater solutions, whether it's capturing water in large containers, urban landscapes, green spaces, or permeable pavers, and green roofs. We've looked at the various applications, and we've seen that we can actually combine all those areas in various applications on rooftops of buildings using our material and combining them with green roof and permeable pavers, which allows us to maximize the space of the rooftops in buildings, as well as retain the water requirements for various city infrastructure standards. So next slide, please. So the concept is to leverage our technology using as an underpad to capture that water on the surface rather than divert it into various tanks and storage areas underground. We've been able to meet those requirements from the cities by capturing a maximum amount of water of 44 millimeters of rainfall. And if you compare that with some of the city standards across Canada and North America, namely in Toronto, the maximum capture requirement is 25 millimeters. So we're exceeding that capture rate, and it's a passive system. So there's no technology involved. There's no managing or monitoring. There's no electronic failure components that can cause havoc to the buildings, potential flooding. It is all captured into the material and then stored there for periods of time and then evaporated or dissipated through various means. So if we go to the next slide, we'll see our first application, which is in Toronto. We're covering the entire rooftop and patio area of a new development that's currently being built. Installation was supposed to be last week. However, it's been postponed due to certain inclement weathers and schedule delays. And what we're doing is we're using our material for the areas around the white space and the gray space in the patios, using both capture capabilities of the green roof, as well as the patio stones. So it's a walkable, usable area, and can retain that water to maximize the stormwater management requirements from the city of Toronto. So moving forward, just from a personal perspective, in terms of how I've experienced working, bringing technologies and innovations into Canada from Europe. Canada is a very conservative environment. It does require some patience. There is typically a slow acceptance rate, especially in the built environment, where in relation to infrastructure and construction of buildings. My recommendation is to at least expect 2+ years of investment and time in order to get at least traction into the concept and ideas. The real requirement is to get local strategic partnerships to help allow those ideas to be introduced to the industry. Getting the right people who have the right connections is really key. And you need to be fully committed, fully invested in order to get traction. It's not easy just to put a toe in the water and just expect orders to come. It really requires a lot of time, commitment, investment, and effort. So a lot of technical questions, a lot of proof of concepts, and the typical question is, have you built anything locally? So typically what I've seen is they always want to see their neighbor do the same thing before they actually take the leap. So again, it does require potentially some prototypes, some test plots with various universities, potentially partnering with some universities that have budgets related to prototypes and testing of the material in the Canadian environment. And ultimately, that comes down to a lot of patience. So I welcome the questions related to any technologies that are coming in. Canada is extremely open to getting innovative technologies. It's just a matter of the patience and educating the industry to make it more worthwhile. Thank you very much for your time, and I look forward to the further discussions.
Brilliant. Thank you, Mark. Really insightful. Great use of textile waste, very impressive. And also some really practical advice there at the end on entering the Canadian market as a European company. And we'll dive into a few more questions a little bit later. I'd really like to encourage the audience to go to slido.com and hashtag CETA Cleantech and ask your questions for Mark, for Gurminder, and also for Ken. So we'll have a really interactive session today. And so next up, I'm going to introduce Ken Friesen, who's the president of Reclay Stewart Edge. Ken, can you please join?
Yes, thank you, Catriona. Hello and welcome everyone, and thank you for having me. And excuse me, this is going to be a presentation of both RSE and Reclay Group, but perhaps just a housekeeping matter before we go further. Our office here is 1 block away from a fire hall, and we occasionally have fire trucks reverberating between the buildings. So I assure you, if that happens, A, I will pause so that you can hear me, and B, be assured that I'm not actually working in a war zone. So if we could move on to this next slide. This is, sorry about that. This is a presentation of both RSE and the Reclay Group. The Reclay Group, which is based in Germany, is in existence since 2002. with operations now in Germany, Austria, Slovakia, Czech Republic, France, Spain, Chile, and Canada and the USA. Reclay Stewart Edge, or RSE, was formed as a startup in 2009 and joined Reclay Group in 2012, and therefore now Reclay Stewart Edge, or RSE. Next slide, please. I'll say just a couple of words about RSE and Reclay by way of providing context for my main points. Our focus is in the area of recycling and sustainability, now key elements of a circular economy. Much of this and much of our activity and business is related to EPR, or extended producer responsibility, and how producer agencies, called PROs, accomplish that for producers. And I'll say more to it further. Next slide, please. The Reclay Group serves a broad swath of CPG companies and retailer customers since 2002, over 3,000 customers, and working in 10 different countries. Its customers and our customers increasingly want either a global approach to their issues, or at least global services. And Reclay has managed through the transition in several European countries from a single agency to an open market system for EPR. And further, Reclay has, especially in Germany, been an outspoken proponent of CETA, even when CETA was still a somewhat unpopular concept in the EU. And it did this because it saw opportunities to better compete in, for example, the heavily regulated field of recycling in Canada, and because as an SME, it doesn't have the reach and power of a large multinational player, which many of our customers do. Next slide. I won't go through all the companies and countries, but I will say that we, in terms of providing sustainability services to a wide variety of retail and consumer product goods companies, we provide not only compliance services, but also consulting services, and I'll speak a little more to that later. And RSE, and I'm the president of Reclay Stewart Edge, is active and responsible for both Canada and the USA. And next slide. A classic definition of Cleantech includes products or services that improve operational performance, productivity, or efficiency, while reducing costs, inputs, energy consumption, waste, or environmental pollution. It's a classic definition, and trust me, our customers want all of those things, even if they don't call it Cleantech. And it's a large part of what we provide to all of our customers, although many of them don't think of it as Cleantech. Now, technology can be both hardware or software, or both. And when we think of innovation in the world today, it's often a combination of the two. Ride sharing, popularized by Uber and others, is essentially a software innovation. However, it's a software innovation that requires old-fashioned hardware called cars to make the system work. Soon these cars may be silent electric cars, and in some places driverless, but nevertheless, it's a combination of software and hardware that really makes it innovative and makes it part of a cleaner solution. And I'd submit to you that there are very few Cleantech solutions today that don't combine some elements of hardware and software. Circular economy solutions for tires, consumer packaging, and electronics are examples of the systemic or software concepts that give recycling greater drive, greater investment, and greater accessibility for citizens and consumers. And I'll speak there, we have an app pictured on the slide, and I'll speak more to that later in this context. Next slide, please. EU and Canada play a key role in advancing, if we could get the next slide, please. Thank you. EU and Canada play a key role in advancing clean tech through policy actions and initiatives in both Canada and the EU to advance to a more circular economy. There's a symbiotic relationship between clean tech and the circular economy, as all of you and everyone in the audience obviously knows. And policy plays a key role in driving this forward, both within private sector companies who adapt to policy and create their own internal policies, as well as policy at a provincial, national, or EU-wide level play a key role in driving clean tech and a circular economy. Secondly, however, while policy drives behavior, it's innovation that makes the most fruitful gain towards sustainability in our view. Innovation happens at typically at a private, and here's my bias coming out, but innovation typically happens at a private sector level, not at a government policy level. But innovation is key towards moving to a greater circular economy. The large EPR markets in the EU have open market competitive systems. Now, whatever one thinks about those, this is something we're now starting to see in Canada, where monopolies or single agency systems are starting to change to an open market system, for example, in Ontario, so as to allow consumer goods companies that pay for recycling ultimately choice in how this is managed. One of the upsides of CETA is the ability to transfer that knowledge about systems and how systems work in relation to EPR specifically, from open market systems in the EU to the first open market systems in Ontario in Canada. Next slide, please. Circular economy solutions require clean tech hardware. Although we're often focused on the software, without the collection, sorting, and processing equipment, it wouldn't be possible. And that collection, sorting, and processing equipment travels both ways. Innovations in Canada are transferred into Europe and vice versa. And my co-presenters have provided some examples of that as well. And EPR, or extended producer responsibility, was long thought of as a more European concept. However, the early versions were actually conceptualized in Canada, in fact, in Ontario. And EPR is a true transatlantic story where that has been passed on from one side of the ocean to the other and back again. And as it relates to current policy, there's active communication between sectors on both sides of the ocean. Next slide, please. I'll just touch on this complicated looking slide to say that public space recycling made in Manitoba has caught the attention of numerous other countries. And it connects consumers and recycling in a convenient way with infrastructure located where consumers actually need it. And I won't go through the slide other than to say it is somewhat complex, requires various stakeholders, and ultimately provides a cleaner, lower cost, and convenient solution for both companies as well as consumers. And it's an example of one of the clean tech systems. And I'll save my next comment for the next slide. Thank you. Clean tech happens where companies make commitments to improve processes or outcomes, There's a number of large companies, CPG companies like Unilever, for example, that have made huge commitments to recycled content, recyclability of their packaging, and social and financial goals as well. Really, really commendable goals and stretch goals in the case, I would say in the case of many companies, all of which require clean tech solutions and clean tech systems. And to attain these goals, such companies need these solutions and clean technology. And Reclay offers these tools and technology so that they can assess their packaging, for example, make changes in procurement, product design, and ultimately have more of their packaging become part of the circular economy, which is everyone's goal. Next slide. Key to a more circular economy are practical and cost-effective solutions to keeping materials in that economy. Obviously recovering the maximum possible in the most cost-effective way goes without saying, but has to be said. Clean tech and the circular economy don't operate in a vacuum. In many cases, we can only do this with the help of consumers and citizens. While innovation typically happens at the private sector level, we need the cooperation and collaboration with citizens and consumers. There are various ways of doing this. The app pictured there, which I won't go into detail describing, is a recycling app that is now being used in Europe and also in Manitoba, will hopefully be used in other parts of the US and Canada. Makes it easier to both reward consumers and encourage consumers to recycle more of their products. Ultimately, for all of those materials to end back up in the circular economy, they need to be collected. People need to make the right decisions as part of that solution. So clean tech, clean tools, and clean solutions are really part of an exciting future for all of us. And I look forward to this session. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ken. Really interesting to see how you're supporting recycling initiatives, but also how you reflected on policy and innovation fundamentally, with the EPR scheme in both Europe and Canada, and like how it has been a transatlantic partnership, this entire time, and with the learnings. So really interesting to see that. And I think sometimes we are, we think about innovation in terms of technology, but also there is innovation in terms of creativity, in terms of policy, in terms of markets, like how we think about that. And that's very important in the context of CETA and trade. So something to think about for the audience as we're thinking through the questions. And so one question that's come through on the Slido is, I'm going to put it to all the panelists. If you had the benefit of hindsight when you first started your EU-Canada partnership, what would be the most valuable advice you could give yourself? Should we start with Gurminder, Mark, and Ken?
Sure. I think it's going to sound a little bit off, but managing expectations. We're developing a new material in new applications. So the timeline of this development, again, we thought it would take 3 years, and now we're 6 years in, and we're still at pilot scale and demonstrating, going from lab scale into pilot and commercial applications. So managing expectations both on our side internally as a company and on our customer side is something that I think, hindsight being 2020, we could have done a better job at. Again, our commercial plan was supposed to be built several years ago, but it's going to come online finally, so I'll leave it at that.
I think the ambition comes with being an entrepreneur as well. You have, great expectations, right? Mark?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would leverage what Gurminder said, but also get investment, the proper investment dollars. line up more of a strategy in terms of the industry's targeting that I'd like to target. It's interesting with Brens, we pivoted from transit, which is what I'm very familiar with and know very, very well, to built infrastructure for buildings and green roofs. So going from, you know, a technology systems type train, passenger rail understanding to green roofs on buildings, it would have been a better fit to understand the industry before taking the step, but also getting some investment dollars from various industry stakeholders to prove the concept and make my life a little less stressful.
Ken?
And my family's life less stressful too.
Yeah. Great, thank you. Great question. If we weren't entrepreneurs, we probably wouldn't have gone down many of the roads that we've gone down, and we've learned things. I'd say I'd highlight that technology, clean tech or otherwise, soft or hard, doesn't understand cultures. Only people understand cultures, and our company found that when it expanded from Germany to Austria, thought that they speak the same language, they use the same currency, etc., and found out the hard way that it's actually a different work culture, different business culture, and didn't want to make the same mistake when we joined from Canada and US with the Reclay group. But those were learnings that we had to make, and again, technology doesn't recognize cultures, people do.
Mm-hmm. That's a really good point. We had a poll running there during the session, asking, you know, what would people like to learn more about, and what do they think is the biggest challenge? And one of the things they mention is, you know, making connections in new markets. You know, do any of you have advice on how to make, you know, strong relationships when you're entering a new market? Or can you share some experience?
I can start, at least from my perspective. It really is important to join associations related to the industries that you're focused on. I can't say more praise than to join the various associations. Most of the associations like to network. They all have conferences once a year. So to get to know the landscape, get to know the players involved, even seek out potential partnerships for the various players involved in that industry. So if you're installing a technology, you'd want to seek a relationship with a contractor that is very focused and oriented in that industry. As I said, you know, networking is really key, and going to these conferences once they're allowed to attend and meet the people that are building these relationships and actually doing the work in the country that you want to invest in.
Great.
Yeah, I would definitely support exactly what Mark just said, that, you know, when things open up again, or whether they're virtual, be active in industry organizations. A lot of our work in Europe, again, started off in first attending conferences in the key areas that we're developing, followed by actually presenting at these conferences. Again, we're offering a solution that's sustainable and can offer certain benefits when adding to other materials. Well, we're finding counterparts, for example, large European chemical companies that were looking for solutions. And typically, you know, having our business development folks make a cold call to, you know, BASF, you know, we wouldn't even know where to start, but when you go to a conference, you find those people that are, you know, in those roles that are looking for solutions that you may be offering. Again, going forward, whether they're virtual conferences such as this or actual, you know, in person, I think it's very important to get out there and be active and you know, get your message out there, because there are people in these large organizations that are specifically tasked to engage with companies such as yourselves.
Great point, Gurminder. And I think, in light of COVID as well, the in-person connections mightn't be there, but joining virtual conferences like this to meet people is so important. And Ken, do you have any recommendations for the audience?
Yeah, I'd echo everything that was said and won't repeat it, but would echo it. And for us, one of those venues has also been the German-Canadian Chamber of Commerce, which has provided some of those kind of connections. But the only additional thing I would say is we're finding it's often through our customers who are multinational that we're able to get a lead from one customer in one country to the same company in another country, and that's also been effective for us.
And leading on a little bit from that, as you're growing the company from startup to scale up, and you're testing the waters in new markets, and you start going to conferences, at what level of scale up do you start seeking those partnerships within the other countries?
If that question is addressed also to me, I would say immediately, looking to those partnerships, looking to those companies that we're already aligned with in other countries. But then, because EPR happens to be typically in a highly regulated environment, we also try and make the connections to those governments in those countries as well. Because government's policy plays such a key role in our business.
Great. Brens, I have a question for you. When you talk about textiles, the questions here is, the assumption is that it's synthetic textiles. And then there's another follow-on question. What about the nanoparticles that could end up in the environment through time with your material? And to conclude the entire circularity circle, what about the end of life of your solution? So what does the full circular solution look like, I guess, is the question.
So because they have a long shelf life, I think they're in the hundreds of years. Our lifespan of our materials can be reintroduced and incorporated into the same material. 10% of what goes into our material is from older car waste, recycled car waste. It just depends on the cleanliness of it. So the last thing we need is to introduce contaminants. However, if it's coming from the same material and same source for stormwater management or for a green track, we can reintroduce it into the production and reincorporate it as further materials. Unfortunately, these polyesters and synthetic fibers aren't going away, so we need to do something with it. What we found was the water tested in our materials was neutral. There was no acidity or any extreme variations from the water that was poured in to the water that was exited. So it's a better, in our opinion, it's a better solution than just leaving it in the landfill and not being able to use it and leveraging the ability to address climate change and stormwater management.
Thanks. And Gurminder, I might put that question to you as well, because you're developing these solutions from forestry-based material. How does end of life look for those solutions?
Well, the cellulose that we're basically commercializing is grass accepted, generally regarded as safe, but we still have to demonstrate that. So we're taking a conventional material that is, again, traded commonly between Canada and Europe, kraft pulp primarily. There's extensive trade primarily going from Canada into Europe for paper making and tissue making, but we are converting it into a different form. We're converting it into a nano form. So there is certain specifications and regulations that we need to demonstrate, and we're still working on that. We directly as a company, as also with industry organizations, are working to ensure that, again, this new form of a commonly used material is still safe. So we still have some work to do there. But generally speaking, in our interactions, as far as getting a technical evaluation and even a pilot scale evaluation, having a certificate that says it's 100% safe and so on and so forth is not necessarily required. But when we do go commercial, that may be required. So this is, for example, this is something that we could address on the regulation side of how we could make it more seamless from getting a material in a different form from Canada into Europe for use.
Got it. Thanks. I have another question. So in terms of your markets, and this is, I guess, is for all of you, the markets that you're targeting, how receptive, what's the size of the market, first of all, for our audience here, some of you are focused on built environment, with green roofs, some on concrete, as well as beverage can recycling and things like that. What's the scope of the market and how receptive are they? What's the comparison of receptiveness between Canada and Europe? Maybe Ken, do you want to have a chat? Start that.
Sure. In terms of the receptiveness question, I'm not sure. I'm not sure if there's much of a difference between Canada and Europe. Europe right now is setting much more ambitious targets and ambitious depending which side of the fence you sit on. If you're a company subject to those targets, they may be called something else. But we're seeing increasing targets in Canada as well. And the US is going to be fascinating in the next 5 years in this regard as well. The biggest change I would see, which is common between both jurisdictions, is that it's companies that are now coming up and making their own commitments for their own reasons and not simply responding to regulation. And these companies, whether it's Unilever, Coca-Cola, et cetera, are all global companies. And so they're making global commitments. And that's really the big change in the last couple of years.
Mm-hmm. And it's interesting you talk about that, because that then cascades down their supply chain. They expect their suppliers to adhere to commitments as well around waste and things like that. We heard from Vestas yesterday, who has a supplier code. Basically, the suppliers face a scorecard mechanism. And if they hit the carbon targets, the waste targets that Vestas expects them to, then more likely they'll become a supplier to Vestas. I thought it was a very interesting approach, but a good signal to the market as well that sustainability is at the heart of business now. I'll put the same question to Mark and Gurminder as well. Mark, as you're looking at built environment and the comparison between Europe and Canada, how receptive are they?
It depends on which jurisdiction you're in. Toronto, Canada has quite a sophisticated stormwater management policy, and it's quite aggressive. So anything that's being built currently requires at least 10 millimeters of rainfall capture, which means expensive storage tanks and all kinds of pumps and technology that's needed to be installed into the building. So it's an added cost to the developer. With next year, I think it's going to reach to 25 millimeters or within the next 2 years. So every single building that's being built, and Toronto has the most construction cranes in North America. So every building that has to be built has to address this issue. That being said, with the new requirements from the US and the Department of Energy and Environment, they are forcing a lot of the municipalities statewide to address stormwater management. And this can be such a huge opportunity for us and a lot of green roof companies that we're working with to meet those standards just at the surface, rather than having those sophisticated and expensive mechanical systems. So the opportunity here is massive. We're about 10 years behind Europe in terms of the standards, so there's going to be a lot of work here.
Interesting. So we should expect a cascade of innovation happening in Toronto based on policy.
Absolutely, and it's exciting to be part of it, to be honest with you.
Brilliant. Gurminder?
Yes, I think, again, when we started the company back in 2014, there's a lot of interest and activity in Europe compared to North America, not just Canada, but both US and Canada. And I've seen that change. North America has caught up to awareness of opportunities to be more sustainable. Again, whether it's just because a lot of the companies that we're dealing with do have, again, operations here in North America. For Lafarge is a good example, where we started working with them in Europe and in France at their R&D center. But now we have several projects both with Lafarge and CETA here in North America. So we have been able to, channel the activity levels that we first tapped into in Europe and sort of, relay them back to North America. And North America for the last couple of years has been catching up to where Europe is with respect to sustainability and companies making commitments to improve sustainability and the circular economy. So we're finding this increased activity level, and obviously we're benefiting from that. Whereas before it was primarily Europe-led, but we are again seeing activities both not in here in North America as well, but Asia as well.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's really exciting, and it's amazing to see. So we've had, in terms of the polls, we've had quite a healthy number of people respond to all the challenges apply to them. And some of them have also talked about, needing more pilot testing opportunities, and it can be hard to assess risk and benefits of expanding to new markets. And I guess, we're almost at time, and building on maybe some of that feedback we're getting through in the polls, what top 2 recommendations, would all 3 of you have to the audience, like considering that, we have policymakers here in the audience, who are trying to ease trade between Canada and Europe. We also have entrepreneurs who are looking to, expand their markets as well and try and assess new markets for them. What 2 recommendations would you have? We'll start with Ken, and then we can go around to Mark and Gurminder.
Good question. I would say two things. Pursue whatever opportunities you have, while at the same time nurturing and trying to support things like CETA. We're talking today specifically in the CETA context. There's other countries as well, and one can't wait for opportunities if the opportunities are there, but do those both simultaneously. Nurture those kind of conditions and go for it.
Great.
So I have a lot to say, but I'll try and limit it to about 3 minutes.
Go for it, Mark.
Okay. In terms of the infrastructure space, the procurement policies need to be changed, need to adapt to innovation, not just what was known in the past, but also what is being done in the future, and what can improve the process of doing that. So a component of innovation has to be part of the procurement policy to encourage innovation within Canada and also encourage investment outside of Canada. Without it, it's just the same status quo constantly. And I'm talking about just, from my perspective, transit and infrastructure, and also building of construction. Our industries in rail and in construction are about 20 years behind the European markets. There is really no encouragement or any intention for companies here that are bidding on the projects that they're bidding on to include or to incorporate innovation. As much as sometimes the projects say that they're being innovative, there's just not enough emphasis and enticement to have companies innovate. So either having a small portion of that overall project incorporate innovation as a proof of concept would be really ideal. And it opens up to not just Canadian companies, but also European companies that can bring that innovation and bring the talent and bring the economies and investment into Canada could be a huge benefit to Canada, and also address some of the investment challenges that we're facing in construction and the built environments. So I can't stress it enough, and I'd be happy to talk to anyone about it at a later time. So find me on LinkedIn and we can have a long chat about it. That innovation part of these P3 projects and large construction projects are really important. All right, I'll leave it at that.
Perfect. Thanks, Mark. It's good to set the scene, and having healthy I would say opportunities to be able to demonstrate, pilot, through small projects, procurement policy. It's a huge thing that needs to be worked on.
And
Gurminder?
It's a struggle. Sorry, yeah.
Yeah, sorry.
I'll just add again, we want to be an exporter of a biomaterial from Canada to Europe. So synchronizing regulatory bodies and which bodies actually control the material. So are we a chemical? Are we a material? Are we even a new material? Are we just a different form of an existing material? So synchronizing activities, again, between Canadian organizations, North American organizations, and European organizations to basically allow for ease of export would definitely be a value to us. As a company, we do have limited resources, so primarily we focus on demonstrating the inherent value of adding our material into something else, and then we focus on sustainability. Again, a third focus area that we should be doing more of is, again, focusing on any possible restrictions or any regulations we would have to address when we do, next year go commercial and look to export larger quantities above and beyond pilot scale. So helping companies such as ours understand and identify those unknown factors that could arise from regulatory bodies would be very helpful. I guess the advice from an entrepreneurial perspective, again, is rely on organizations to do that for you, and you can focus on the actual business that you're focused on, developing opportunities for your product or your material in a clean tech / sustainable manner.
Perfect. Great. Thanks so much, Gurminder, and to Mark and to Ken as well. I'm going to move into wrap-up comments, but I think all three of you have provided really interesting insights, and it's actually a very interesting perspective because we're hearing from companies who coming from the forestry sector, coming from the built environment sector, coming from EPR, extended producer responsibility, policy innovation, as well as beverage can recycling. There's lots of opportunity here, but everyone has a bit of a different perspective. But at the same time, it's focus on growing the business, focus on that. Partners are so important at the early stage, and to start from the beginning. Particularly in new markets, look out for those people who you want to engage with, whether it's your customers, whether it's associations, and rely on organizations to help you while you focus on the business. I thought that was great, Gurminder. It sounded like as well in terms of opportunity, super exciting that lots of corporations have sustainability policies and commitments, climate neutrality, circular economy in place, because that is encouraging and driving down the supply chain for them to look for products and services that meet circular economy requirements. So an exciting time for entrepreneurs who are looking to engage. And I know that this event its purpose is to help with that. So I hope entrepreneurs got to meet some of the corporations yesterday. And interesting to see the policy is becoming, it's a driver. And, Europe has Green Deal, Canada has new commitments in place now around climate. They're hosting the circular economy, the World Circular Economy Forum later this year as well. It's a virtual event, but that might open up more opportunities as well around policy commitments, but also for more of this matchmaking type activity that we're seeing at virtual conferences. So that's definitely one to sign up for. Room for improvement, and I think this is a good one for the policymakers to listen out to, is around procurement and early stage, opportunities for, testing, piloting, sandboxes, that type of thing. That's always helpful for entrepreneurs, especially if they're looking to enter a new market. So those kind of supports are brilliant in the context of CETA. Also, as mentioned, synchronizing regulatory bodies, and that's been a huge pain point for a number of entrepreneurs I've seen over the past number of years. And so it's very important as you navigate regulatory systems in new markets, get up to speed, learn about it as soon as possible, and talk to government and officials about it as well as soon as you can. So we're going to wrap up now. I want to say thank you to all the speakers, and there is now a networking break for everybody, and there's going to be more SME sessions on this morning or this afternoon, depending on where you're at. Thank you, everybody. Take care.
Thank you.